Hello, friends, and welcome to Impact Everywhere, a podcast that searches for people having a positive impact in unexpected places. My name is Benjamin Von Wong, and today I'm excited to have Casson Trenor on the show. Casson and I met on a boat sailing through the North Atlantic Gyre in an event called the Ocean Plastics Leadership Summit. After learning that I was a vegan living in San Francisco, he asked me what my favorite vegan restaurant was. Little did I know, he was the owner of the vegan restaurant Shizen, the best sushi restaurant in the city, period. We quickly became friends, and I was fascinated to hear how many lives Casson has led. From an activist sailing with sea shepherds to the founder of the world's first sustainable sushi restaurant to his current endeavor, writing children books to ignite their love for the ocean. This week, Casson explores what it means to have a why without necessarily knowing how. Here he is talking about his latest book, Umiju.
The book is called Umiju, U-M-I-J-O-O. And it's a story of a girl who has a relationship with the ocean because she really likes to eat fish, but she doesn't understand the implications of that. And through a series of magical journeys, she's able to go into the ocean. She's able to interact with animal characters down in it who teach her about her relationship with the ocean and the impacts of her choices. I think a unique thing about the book is that I approached it really with the idea of how do I make it a multi-sensory experience? And this was a lesson for me because I come from the sushi industry. One of the things that I realized when we were trying to push conservation in sushi was we have an opportunity to tell a story of conservation through multiple senses at once. We're not just talking, we're not just showing pictures, we're actually feeding people. And it thread the message together more convincingly. So when I set out to write this book, I challenged myself, how can I make this as rich as possible? So the book is hand painted by a really amazing pop surrealist painter named Kaya Koopman. I was absolutely driven to get the best imagery possible. And it's also very tactily developed. You feel the cover and it's very smooth and it's embossed and it feels good in your hand. And I just believe that the more senses you can engage with someone, the more a message can resonate.
So how do you take something that's so squishy like a story? How do you know when you've done it well, when you've impacted someone, when you've made a difference?
I think it's a tough thing to detect. But the first step for me really is about having the faith that the medium can work. And I have that faith because it worked on me. When I was about 7 or 8, I was given a children's book about the ocean. And I didn't know it at the time, but it changed my life. Here I am 30 years later working on ocean issues. And I think a lot of it probably had to do with that little book that I was given. One of the main reasons that I wrote mine was because I'm hoping to maybe have a part of delivering an experience like that to the next generation. I got a text message not too long ago from an old friend of mine from high school. And it just said, hey, my 10-year-old daughter loves your book. And had a picture of her in her room holding my book with her whole room done up in oceanic imagery and seascapes. And it just meant so much to me. I mean, that's what I was hoping for. And when I get messages like that, when I get texts and pictures showing people that believe and that resonate, that have welcomed the book into the lives of them and their families, I feel like there's something there. And I don't know how to capture it in a metric, but I so believe that it works because it worked on me.
As a storyteller and a fellow artist, one of the biggest struggles I have is measuring the impact of my art. And I really struggle with that boundary between trying to understand when is the project worthwhile? When was the amount of time, energy, and effort put in worth the trade-off? How do you measure your impacts and when does it become enough?
This is such an important question. I think one of the biggest challenges we have is figuring out what metric to use for these new and novel, interesting approaches when we're trying to make big changes. Usually the things that we're trained to use are numbers or money or number of people that make a certain decision or vote a certain way. But when you're trying to do something like protect part of the ocean or change the way people think, it's tough to have access to a metric that makes a lot of sense. It's often very difficult to capture what's going on and you lose, or at least I lose enthusiasm. You know, for example, for the book, if I were only tracking sales, that would be tough. This is not major market fiction. I'm not going to be on the top of the New York Times bestsellers list. If I'm just looking at that, then I'd have to call it a failure. But I don't think it is a failure. I don't think that's the only way to track these things. So I try to open up and think about how many different things can I look at. When I do my reports, to my funders, I try to gather as much multimedia experience as possible, similar to how I'm talking about how to make an impact. How can I use lots of different threads to weave something really strong and rich? So yeah, I'll talk about sales, but I'll also talk about other interesting things that happen organically. Like there's a group of manta ray conservationists in Fiji that just sent me a video of this baby female manta ray that they named Umiju. And I get to send this video out to people on the mailing list and be like, look what we're doing. Yeah, we're selling books, but we're also inspiring people. And I think when it comes to working together to create a better world for everyone, that's how we change. We inspire one another. It's not about forcing people to change. It's about leading by example and giving people reasons that they want to change on their own.
I want to bring it to the present real quick. And that's, what do you see right here and right now in a time of COVID-19? Are there opportunities that people should be seizing upon? Because, in moments of crisis, fractures start to form inside of existing systems. And within those fractures lie massive amounts of opportunity. And so I'm curious to know, from your vantage point, do you see anything you're personally excited about as you see this new normal forming?
Absolutely. I agree with you 100% that crisis is a crucible that allows us to sort of purify and reforge ourselves into something stronger and something new and become better versions of ourselves. I think one of the amazing things about human beings is that when things get tougher, we get stronger. And that's an incredible characteristic. Most of the big shifts in my life, big moments of growth, have come when things were really, really tough. And I realized that I couldn't rest on my laurels or keep coasting or keep believing what I was believing anymore. I can't count how many conversations I'm having with people right now that are all about, I'm rethinking my life. I'm switching that. I'm doing this better. I got to find another way to do that. We are all checking ourselves. We are all looking for ways to adjust. And that's really when I think we become our greatest selves. The special thing about the COVID crisis, it's offering us a deeper question on a meta level, which is, can we check our drive for productivity? Can we check this deep drive we have to do things, to define ourselves by our output and what we create? Can we find a way inside ourselves to become more comfortable with stillness, with insecurity, with discomfort, and with the unknown? And I think if we focus on that and really gut punch that drive we have to, okay, I'm going to solve this now and I'm going to solve it in the way I have before. No. This is bigger than that. This is a better, deeper, richer opportunity than that. This is a chance for us to check our whole system, and it could change the very way we relate to the planet.
It almost sounds like the lesson in all of this is that us as an entire culture or an entire species need to learn how to work smarter, not harder, in order to just make stuff for the sake of making stuff and get off the hamster wheel of the world. You've referenced a couple of times now that you have learned different lessons in different moments of hardship. And out of all the people I've interviewed, I think you're one of those who have the least linear journey. Do you want to do a quick summary for the listeners here on the inflection points that have led you to where you are today?
There's always been a part of me that's really cared about the ocean. I haven't always been conscious of it. I haven't always been working on it directly. But as I ping-ponged from job to job, as I went from college to culinary school to burning out in restaurants, it just became more and more clear little by little that I needed to be able to connect everything I did every day to something that I believed in. And the more I could do that, the better I felt about myself. And the less I could do it, the harder it was. I used to think that was enough. And I guess a moment of personal crisis would be when I found out that it wasn't. I was in Antarctica in 2006. I was on a vessel for Sea Shepherd doing anti-whaling activity, and I was having a really tough time. I wasn't very good at anything I was doing. I was really uncomfortable. I was sick, but I really, really believed in the cause. And I convinced myself that it didn't matter what I did as long as it was for the right reason. I had this moment one day when we were playing chicken with a whaling ship, and I found myself in this position where the ship was coming straight at us and we weren't moving, and it was so much bigger than we were. It was like just facing down the Death Star as it was coming at us, and the water was so cold. And I just knew that if that ship hit us, I was going to go in the water and I was going to die. There was a break inside me at that moment because this question came up to my mind. The question was this worth it? And the answer was no. And it destroyed my cosmology. It destroyed this idea I was operating under that it didn't matter what I did as long as it was for the right reasons. And it took me a couple years to figure out what you do matters just as much as why you do it. It's important to do something for the right reason. It's important to do something because we believe in the cause behind it, but it's also important to do something because it's what we love to do. And I think it's when we put those things together that we find our path both to personal growth and a way to be our best self in this world, to make the change we want to see while at the same time enjoying life and being the truth of who we are.
What you've just described is the importance of putting your own oxygen mask on first before trying to put the oxygen mask on the planet. And you went through that entire life experience, an entire section of your life, only to realize upon a moment of imminent death, what a rude awakening.
It was really tough. I was pretty rudderless after that. I got off the ship in Africa and I just wandered around Africa for 6 months or so, trying to figure out who I was and what I was supposed to do. I was pretty lost. And little by little, the simplest truths finally started to surface. Little questions that are so simple, but are so hard at the same time. Like, what do I like to do? How would I like to spend my day? Finally, I got enough space where the answers presented themselves in a way that I came to believe. And I came home, and that's how I got into the sushi industry. Because I finally was able to confront that paradoxical question of how do you love sushi and love the ocean if sushi is destructive? And I'd always just accepted that I couldn't do both, even though I was brought up to love sushi. It was my favorite food from when I was young. It was part of my youth. But it was only after I had that really difficult moment and all the time to process afterwards that I was able to realize, hey, this doesn't have to be this way. What if I assume that it is possible to do these things? And it was like a lightning bolt. I teamed up with some amazing sushi chefs, and that was the beginning that led us to all the restaurant work.
I've been reading a book right now. It's called Range by David Epstein, and it talks about the importance of cross-pollination between disciplines to come up with unexpected solutions to big problems. And you've kind of done that without necessarily being an expert at anything and looking outwards, but you just looked inwards. These are the things that I love. Why don't I just put them together? What could be possible from there? Tell us about this sushi restaurant journey, because I think for many people, opening a restaurant in and of itself is super daunting. How do you combine purpose and the complexities of doing a brick and mortar business? And what was that journey like?
Well, I think I should preface this by saying I was in the restaurant business once long ago before this happened. After college, I went to culinary school and I left there to cook in restaurants, and I was terrible. I would forget things and burn things. I couldn't do it. I couldn't hack it. And when I left the industry, I swore I would never come back. Lo and behold, fast forward, 5-10 years, and I'm back in the restaurant industry. The only reason I got back into it is because I got pulled into it as part of this mission. I was writing my first book, Sustainable Sushi, and I was talking to my publisher, and they said, when this comes out, you're going to have a lot of proof you need to put out there. And we realized the best thing that we could do would be to have already opened a successful restaurant that operated by the principles in the book by the time the book came out. I was fortunate enough to be introduced to 2 sushi chefs who were really interested in the idea. And I never could have done it by myself. I'm not a good enough cook. I'm not a good enough business owner, but there's nothing that is impossible when you have the right team. And looking back, I'm not sure if I believe in luck, and I'm not sure if I believe in coincidence. I don't know what it is, but I met the right people at the right time, and we became the right team to do something that really had never been done before, which was proactively open the world's first sustainable sushi restaurant. Back then, people thought we were crazy. People thought sustainable sushi meant that everything was going to taste like rubbery tofu. And people thought we were nuts. We sort of thought we were nuts. But I think most good ideas start with people that might think they're a little nuts.
Tell me, what is it like to have impact through someone's taste buds? There's something really interesting there. And I also want to make a note that I love the fact that you created your own case study. So often when you read about this research, it's all hypothetical and it doesn't become real until someone goes out and does it. And you just went like, you know what? We're going to make this thing into an actual reality. And there's something really, really cool there.
It doesn't matter otherwise, right? My role in the world is I'm an activist. That's sort of what I do. I'm not an academic. I'm not a scientist. I don't have the ability or the training or the education to generate this information that I need as an activist to do what I do. My job is to take that information and find a way to communicate it to people and put it into action in the world. So I rely on scientists and academics to tell me what's going on and tell me, hey, this is what we need. This is what you as a leader, as a chef, as a this, as a that, what we need from you to make the world better. My job is to take that information and make it actionable. There is nothing like feeding somebody and watching their eyes light up, not just because they like the food, but because you can tell that they are understanding the message that you're trying to send. It's a type of communication that I never would have gotten to experience had I not gotten back into the restaurant industry in a mission-driven business. And it doesn't always happen, for sure. But sometimes I have this incredible experience where I get to go out there and sit with someone or bring a dish to somebody and come back after they've eaten it, and I get to say, how was it? And you can just tell that they're thinking differently about their relationship to food. And that's why we do this. It goes back to sort of what I was saying earlier about reaching people with multiple senses. You can talk to someone, you can show someone a picture, but when you can feed somebody something and they get to experience it that way, it's this kinesthetic thing that you get to share it's really special. It's almost like showing up with this level of evidence instead of having a debate or instead of trying to convince someone in a cerebral fashion. It's just like, taste this. Just taste this. Let's talk afterwards. And it's a different discussion. You have a different discussion with someone if you start with food than if you don't.
I've never thought about food as an ingredient for activism. Now that you're saying it, though, when we say something, there is a filter that goes on through our head. We have all these preconceived notions of what should or shouldn't be. But you're right, with our taste buds, there are none of those. It's either you like it or you don't. And I find that just so interesting. It sounds like you're really exploring this multifaceted approach because there's not any one thing that's going to solve the problem on its own. As a fellow activist, I've been looking at this entire plastic issue for a very long time. And it seemed like just as we were entering the cusp of a revolution, I mean, literally every single company in the world was on the back foot and it was going to peak and things were changing. It seems like the tides have completely turned. What are your thoughts when it comes to plastics and COVID and the future?
I think there's something here in the COVID crisis that can help us with ocean plastics. I talk a lot about plastics when I do public speaking and stuff because it's such a massive and all-encompassing threat to oceanic systems right now and the health of our planet. One of the reasons that plastics have become so ubiquitous is because plastics allow us to live in ways that we never could before. And it really allows us to perform miraculous tasks. And one of the ways that plastic has allowed us to do that is in the medical field. Plastic in the medical field has allowed us to be sterile and effective in ways that we never could before. So now we find ourselves in this time where we have an unprecedented number of people that need medical care at the same time. And we're going through a tremendous amount of plastic to do it. As an anti-plastic activist, one could be tempted to say, well, look, now the plastic is, we're using even more and it's even more of a problem. I don't feel that way. I think this is what plastic is for. If you think of it sort of as like we have a planetary quota, like there's only so much single-use plastic that we can take as a global environment. And we're way beyond that number right now, which is why it's clogging up the ocean. But if we figure, look, this is what single-use plastic is for. It's to keep people alive. It forces us to check ourselves and be like, that's a hell of a lot more important than having a bottle on my drive somewhere. Single-use plastic can be an unbelievably important item that can keep people on this earth with us. But that's what we should be using it for. And if we figure, well, we're going to need to use it for that, and we have a quota, then we need to figure out how to not use it in all these other places. Things like COVID, I think it's a huge wake-up call for us to get real about how we've come to rely on single-use plastic for all these minor, unimportant tasks that do not merit that kind of footprint.
What a fantastic way to spin the narrative. But I'm not quite sure. How do you envision us actually conveying this new narrative? Actually, now that I think about it, how are cultural narratives actually formed? Any thoughts on that?
Oh, man. I think the benefit, and I'm hesitant to use that word, but The benefit to this situation around cultural narratives is that we are all going through it together. And I'm also hesitant to use it here, but the benefit to the ocean plastics crisis is that it is something that nobody wants. In most cases with environmental issues, we can't all agree on a positive outcome. You look at things like carbon or you look at things like deforestation. Yeah, there's lots of people that want the rainforest to stop burning, but there are also people that want it to burn, which is why it's happening. People that are making money off of the agriculture or what have you. Nobody wants plastic in the ocean. So we have these two really strong shared underpinnings. We're all going through the COVID crisis. Nobody wants plastic in the ocean. If we're talking about how to create these norms, I think we start from things we can agree on, and we let the story spiral out as it touches all of us and as we share experiences. And we're in the fortunate situation where we're sharing these values across incredible disparate groups. We're all being touched by COVID. Nobody wants plastic in the ocean. Maybe this is going to right itself. I'm going to try to do it through what I do, children's literature, and through outreach and through public speaking and feeding people. But there's a million other people that are fired up and being touched about this too. And it's going to happen because we're all going to work together.
I think that's the most positive thing that I've heard about the ocean plastics crisis, that ultimately it's something that everybody is going to work on together. Ultimately, though, it really depends on the leadership coming through, right? Because consumers can only make so much noise. At the end of the day, we need government and we need companies to also come on board, which I guess brings us to the Ocean Plastics Leadership Summit, which is where we met. Do you want to tell the listeners a little bit about that initiative, which I think is so cool?
The Ocean Plastics Leadership Summit was designed to create an undeniable galvanizing experience for a group of people in whose hands rests an inordinate amount of power to make a difference. The idea that we can take these major decision makers out, show them the gravity of the problem, turn them into a team, and then get them moving on creating solutions. That was the basic idea. That was the impetus for it. And it's been amazing to see the progress that's been made. There's been challenges because of COVID, for sure. The first leadership summit, we all went out together into the Sargasso Sea looking for plastic with some of the top plastic and oil executives around the world, as well as some leaders from NGOs and all sorts of people. It's an incredibly diverse stakeholder group. And we did it together and we did it as a team. And we had amazing conversations about how nobody wants plastic in the ocean. We would be doing that again right now. The second expedition was supposed to be in early May, but because of COVID, obviously, that's not happening. So we're looking for new solutions. We're trying to be agile and find ways to create progress before we can get out on the ocean again. But I think the big win from that has been the creation of this devoted network of disparate and interesting people that have serious decision-making power. It's going to take a little while to see what this really turns into, but I think it's snowballing into something amazing.
So you're tackling the issue of the oceans through basically a ton of different directions, from top down, from leadership, from education through kids to food, through culture. And then also you have a component of social activism that you participated in, especially in the past. For those who feel a little bit stuck and they just think the world is too complicated or they can't see how they fit in the world, what kind of advice do you have for them?
There's something to be said for doing something that makes you feel good and finding a way to do it on behalf of what you believe in. It can be a start, at least. I'll be honest, one of the reasons I try a bunch of different ways is because I'm not very good at a lot of them. I try a lot of different things because I try to figure out what feels right and where I stick and what makes a difference. And the ones that I feel like I'm good at and I get more satisfaction from, those are the areas that I end up staying in. And sometimes you don't always know what you're good at. Sometimes it's hard to figure it out. I mean, it seems like a simple question. What do I like to do? What do I enjoy? What am I good at? Sometimes it doesn't feel that simple. I think a lot of it is just trying and allowing yourself to have that experience of enjoying it or not enjoying it and learning how to code that I don't like this or I don't feel good at this, not as reprimanding yourself, not as I shouldn't have done this, but just as I'm learning about myself. I'm learning more about myself, about what I want to do, about what feels right. And it's not a failure. It's just gathering information so you can know yourself better and better and get closer and closer to what you love.
All right, I'm curious, Casson, what do you think is your superpower?
my superpower. Well, I'm pretty stubborn, and I know that's often seen as a negative quality, but in this space, sometimes stubbornness is what you need. Sometimes stubbornness can be the difference between giving up and pushing forward. I mean, in this society, we're bombarded with so much negativity and so much doom speak and information that's telling us it's time to let go and surrender. But if you're stubborn and you hold to your ideals, you can withstand that kind of language while at the same time saying, yeah, okay, I know the world's in trouble, but it can be better. I believe it can be better. And I'm not going to allow the news of the day to change my mind about that. I'm an idealist. So yeah, I think now is a time to be stubborn. And that's something that I can bring to the table.
It's so funny how perspective really changes everything. It's not so much about what you're born with, but how you choose to wield those gifts or those characteristics that you are given. And I think that's just so wonderful. Well, Casson the Stubborn, thank you so much for coming on this podcast.
I like that.
It sounds like a character in a video game. Thank you so much for coming on this podcast. I look forward to following you on your journey. Is there an ask that you have for the audience that's listening?
Yeah, straight up, I'd love for you to go and grab a copy of Umiju. I think it's a great time. We're all at home with our families right now. We need things to bond us to our kids. We need gifts to give to our neighbors. Help me spread the word. Help me spread the book. I think it's something that you'll like. I think it's something that you'll enjoy sharing with your family. So please check it out.
All right. Thank you so much, buddy.
Hey, thank you for having me.
All right, y'all. That was Casson Trenor. Be sure to check out his book on Amazon. That was Umiju, Umijoo, if you're curious to learn more. If you're enjoying this podcast, there are 3 simple things that you can do to help support us. You can leave a rating on Apple Podcasts or your favorite podcast player, share this episode with a friend, or follow us on Instagram at Impact Everywhere Podcast for a collection of shareable sound bites. Next week, we have the founder of Photographers Without Borders, Danielle Da Silva. Danielle is a master storyteller, conservationist, and activist running an organization of over 30 people, and talks through how she balances the complex issues of ethics, impact, diversity, and inclusion, along with decolonization. If that sounds exciting to you, make sure to subscribe because impact is everywhere.